I'm Bill Combs.
And I'm Jeff Newton.
And we are Flashbang Creative.
Well, Jeff, what do you want to talk about today?
Today I think we should talk about picking your price point. It's something that we see a lot of differences between the instructors that we work with out there, and in all honesty, I think it's one of the biggest factors that separates you from being successful or not. So with that in mind,
yeah, I agree with that.
Why don't you jump off with it, Bill, and I'll pose you the question, how, as an instructor, how would you pick your price point?
Well, I'm going to approach it from a little bit different angle. One of the things, as we were doing a lot of market research to find out if kind of what we're doing over at Flashbang Creative was really a need, was talk to instructors. And as I spoke with them, I would ask them, how's business? What are you doing? How are you generating leads? What is your price point? Yada, yada, yada. And a lot of times I would ask, what are your profit margins? And I was sort of, I wasn't face-to-face with these guys. It was over the phone, but I could tell if we were face-to-face, it would have been a deer in the headlights. And most people don't seem to think of it from or look at it as a profit margin kind of thing. It doesn't seem like, and I mean, this is a lot of people. So I may not be talking to, the audience that is listening to us right now, but an overwhelming majority of them don't really think of their time as money, which is crazy to me. So I would ask these guys, what's the cost of one of your courses? And a lot of times I was getting $50, $55, and that's pretty cheap. I mean, at least in our area, that's dirt cheap. And that's what triggered me to ask, wow, that's lower than I'm used to, lower than we've done it in the past, significantly lower.
Yeah, you start asking them different questions about, well, how did you pick that number, or where did that price come from?
Yeah, and basically they sort of reached out, probably ghosted some instructors to see what the going rate was, and maybe it was $55, but is that really the price that you can come to the market with? And that's a big key takeaway I had is, are they able to come to market at that price point? I mean, it's pretty low, especially guys that have to rent range time or
pay RSOs to help them during the firing portion.
Yeah, or rent a space. A lot of these guys, they sort of travel, which is very smart. That way you reach a new audience and spread the word of your business. But at any rate, this is without a doubt the leading reason that people seem to get out of this business. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, we reached out, nationally to instructors, and just because somebody's name or business is, a registered instructor doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing it anymore. And a lot of these guys who are out, that's why they weren't making any money. And I kind of asked them, well, what was stopping you from making, whatever dollar amount that you deemed worthy for your time? And they said that, my area, they just don't charge that much. And that's kind of where it got my wheels turning, that you can't just come to market at a generic price. You have to, factor in all the details, all of your overhead. Your time is overhead, and you do not have to be the cheapest. That seems to be a common misconception, is you have to come to the market and be cheap in order for people to want to come. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think it really comes back down more towards your actual value proposition. What are you doing to differentiate yourself from everyone else that's chosen that price point? And if you want to be higher, why would someone come to you over any of those other instructors that are selling it for the quote unquote market rate? we used to have an internal term here that we would joke about after we figured it out, but it was kind of the great race to the bottom, meaning, if we can just be a little bit cheaper, a little bit more effective, or a little bit more efficient than the other guy, people will come to us just from a price standpoint alone. And boy, we couldn't have had a worse mindset when it came to trying to operate a business profitably and effectively when we're talking about the gun business or other side.
Yeah, price and value are two separate key items. And just because your price point is low doesn't mean that the value has to be low. But could you say bump up that cost from $55 to say $95 and still put people in the seats, fill the seats? Look at this from a long-term standpoint, right? So a lot of these instructors, they don't stick around real long. There are guys out there that have been doing this 10, 12 years, but there's also an overwhelming majority that do it for, say, 2 years. And the first 2 years of any business is the hardest part. I mean, that's what separates the men from the boys, so to speak, is the first 2 years. That's building your base, building your brand, getting name recognition, becoming a key player. So what if you bumped up your price a little bit and you were able to weather, the storm, so to speak? Hell, you could have your rates at $95 and put 5 less people in a class and still come out ahead. You don't have to worry about, having all the seats full then.
Yeah, that's probably a good point to jump in on. Don't look at that as a pricing decision. Look at that as a value proposition. Again, I'm going to hit that a couple times, but what is your student to instructor ratio? If you have 5 less people in that course, but you're charging a bit more of a premium, how do you flip that from a marketing standpoint to say that, you're going to get a lot more one-on-one attention, or you're going to get more personalized coaching so that it's not just transactional, but it's a lot more relational. And that would be one way that you could position your pricing difference and why someone would want to come take that course from you versus the other person, the other instructor. And that maybe even branches off into a whole nother conversation we could have about knowing your target market and understanding who those customers are and who the students are, because you're going to have a difference in types of students that come through your doors too. You'll have the ones who are getting into firearms for their first time, and so they may be intimidated by the entire process. So to have more of a one-on-one really coaching session more than just a course to get a piece of paper might be appealing to them. Whereas you may have your really advanced shooter who's been to countless number of trainings, and yet they're still out there trying to hone their craft and increase their skill. Because again, we'll hammer that home. These are deteriorating skills, and the only way to get better is to continue to work on them and continue to refine them. And someone else being able to look over your shoulder or next to you to spot that little movement or something and give you feedback on, they may want the smaller student to ratio equation too, because they know you're going to be giving them more focused attention.
Yeah, I definitely think you can make more money. And it's not just about money, but I think you can be more successful. How about that? That's a better way to look at it, by having, say a smaller class with that more hands-on. Let's look at it a different way. If you were to switch roles and you're a consumer, and say I wanted to learn how to play golf. I don't golf, but let's say I did want to learn how to play golf. And I want to get lessons. I want to go to an instructor. How am I going to find the guy or the girl? I'm not going to do it by price point, because I want to be good. I don't want to just know how to swing a club. I want to know how to swing a club with the result that I wanted. I want to get that ball on the damn green or put it in the hole. And so when I'm wanting to expand on my skills, the last thing that I'm thinking about is, price point or go with who's cheapest. And that's by no means saying that I could afford to go to a pro, but it's going to turn me off if I find out, hey, Gary over here at the country club, he's $30 cheaper than everyone else. I'm going to wonder why. Why is he cheaper? I might go to the middle road. Just something to think about.
Yeah, on that same wavelength, we had talked about in one of our previous shows too, understanding the life cycle of your business, and Bill mentioned it earlier when it comes to the lifetime value of that customer. So, don't ever think of these as one-time transactions or single instances where that student's only going to be showing up one time. So whether you think or not, you probably have the same course that at least one other instructor has in your geographical area. In most cases, that's going to be a concealed carry course. And in most cases, every instructor has and is willing to have sort of what we would call a loss leader class or a loss leader offering. And all it's there to do is to compete, in that case, on price, to get people that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten in front of you. But then you need to show up and be on stage and deliver such a valuable experience that you leave an impression with that student and they end up wanting to take follow-up courses with you, which, then you start to calculate what's the return on that one CCW class or that loss leader course, and how can you develop a relationship with each of these students to have them come back and hone their skills and continue to develop, versus just kind of the one and done, yep, here's your piece of paper and off you go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. CCW is usually that loss leader for some people. However, I have spoken with a couple people from Utah recently, and one of them, he's a young guy. He's a college kid, and he just got his certification, and it's the only class he's planning on offering, and he still wants to come in at that $50, $55 price point. And I don't want to tell people how to run their business. I didn't step on his toes. I didn't suggest anything. But if that was the only course that I was running, I would want, better margins, because you're not going to be able to use it as a tool to promote your next class. You should never stumble across anyone without promoting. And, that's the nature of the game. I mean, it's all about getting them into a sequence of coming back.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And again, you got to think about getting inside that student's head too, right? So they're all going to come from a different place with different intentions and different goals and desires, but it's your job to take that interaction, the one course that you do have where you're in front of them, to leave an impression that stretches them beyond perhaps where they were thinking or what they were thinking about. It's all about providing them additional perspective, opening up their worldview, and hopefully getting them to come back then and continue on that path. Especially if we're talking about CCW, guys, because, if we're talking just the concealed carry portion, that was really the impetus for Bill and I to dive into instructing, was really the shared desire that he and I had with regards to safety, education, not just for the carrier, but for everyone else around them, because, in every state's different, so different requirements are out there, but the litmus test to hand someone a gun or for them to walk into any store and purchase it and be on the street tomorrow after their course or after they got their piece of paper is pretty low. And it's not about infringing or making anything more difficult. It still just comes down to safety and education and being responsible. And we knew that was going to be the highest volume level of customer for us to reach. So that's where we started. And, taking that opportunity to make a minimum requirements CCW course and adding additional value-added content into that anyone and everyone that's considering carrying on a daily basis, or maybe not even carrying, they just want to, keep it with them in their truck or have it at the house. Taking that opportunity where you have them in your class for the required amount of time and blowing their minds from a other things they need to think about standpoint and value that you can almost give them as a teaser for, oh my God, that guy, revolutionized how I look at this, and I want to know more, or I want to do more. I'm going to go back a month later, or his next course that If I took CCW, maybe I want to look at a home defense or self-defense inside the home. Maybe it's a self-defense outside the home. What is your course offering, and how can you tailor those so that they really build on each other? And again, going back to that lifetime value of the customer, how can you position your one and only interaction with that person into a valuable enough experience that they want to come back and continue to grow it?
Well, let's talk about how would we go about, say I'm a new instructor and I'm listening to us right now. How would we go about, coming up with our profit margins, or what we should come to market with? Obviously, the first step that I would do anyways would be scope out the market in my area. I'm gonna find out what the going rate is, who's my competition, and what they're doing. I'm gonna do a little recon.
And you actually look too, what are they offering for that price point? Because this is where you need to start thinking about not being in the apples to apples game. Just a course, let's call it a concealed carry course, certification course, can look very much the same on paper if you don't, again, put additional things in there to stand out and differentiate yourself from everyone else, so that maybe if you are $20 higher than the next guy, you might pique someone's interest, because if I'm price shopping alone, I would want to know, why is that guy $20 more? And then if you have the right type of description of what you offer and the value you bring, then I might be more willing to pay that extra $20, $30, $40 to spend 8 hours with you versus the other guy.
I think another thing, a really simple thing to add value, while you were talking, my wheels were turning. Provide them with, almost like cliff notes of the course. When I took my concealed carry, I didn't really walk away with anything. As far as material or anything to go back on, and there's a lot of information, especially for someone new to the firearms world, because a lot of people, that's the first thing they do. They go get a gun and then they take the course, which is scary in some ways, but at least they're getting out in the community. But another thing that I was thinking of is, what about your PowerPoint presentation? How easy is it? I don't know how much a CD is. Cheap, or even email them a version of your
peel out the pieces of the slide deck that you would want them to sort of have as their back pocket reference guide to the most important pieces.
And that would be relatively easy to do, is clean it up. You obviously don't want to lose any intellectual property, but let's face it, if there's other instructors in the game, they've got everything you have. So what it boils down to is put the information back in their pocket. You could easily send them a digital copy of the material you went over, and it would allow them to have some sort of quick reference, or create that quick reference, because it's a lot of information. You're kind of drinking through a fire hose when you're sitting in that class.
Yeah, and again, put yourself in the mindset of your student or of your prospect, and think of things that are outside your classroom that you can have associated with you, right? So maybe one of those things, those takeaways, the in-course deliverables, as I would call it, maybe one of those is a dry fire routine. That you kind of put here's your steps 1 through 4 or whatnot, and maybe you even demonstrate it in class as part of your presentation, but then it's a one sheet takeaway type of a deal that, whether it's every night or once a week, or, whatever interval that person is running through that drill, they're actually going to be associating that drill with you, whether you know it or not, because you're the one that taught it to them. So implicitly in the back of their mind, you're planting those seeds every time they run through that drill about, I wonder what other nuggets of information I could learn from this instructor.
Well, and this is all relatively quick to do, and it's value added. So that value added material or content is what can differentiate you from your competition out there. And that's why you could come to market with a little bit better price, put a little bit more money in your pocket, and be able to sustain the industry.
Yeah, I sort of derailed you. You started talking about knowing what your operating costs are. And I think if we go back to that thought process, kind of at the top of this episode, and we've talked about it in other shows too, is, you've got to treat this, you have to treat this like a business. You can't just run with it because it's something that you enjoy and you're passionate about it, and you're getting some money in exchange for your time, but you have to treat it like a business, which means you need to write all this stuff down. You need to have it mapped out. You need to know, okay, what are the requirements for teaching this or instructing this course? It needs to be a 4-hour or an 8-hour course. Perfect. Where are you going to do it? How much is the venue going to cost you? Hard costs, after tax, after everything. Are you providing ammo, or is your student bringing the ammo? Those kinds of things, targets, all that other stuff. Do you have a range or don't you? And do you have to pay for the range?
Let me interrupt right there. I like to give real examples. I was talking to a guy from Texas last week, and I kind of referenced him in our last podcast, either episode 2 or 3. But one thing he was saying is his students, they pay for their range time, right? And that's an easy way to do it. I mean, that's really easy. But what if you went to this range and you approached the manager and said, "Hey, I'm going to be bringing bodies in. Can you give me a price point break on the per individual price point?" That's what I'm trying to say. And I don't think he'd ever thought of this. And I never mentioned it to him. Again, I don't like to tell people how to run their business, but just think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
That manager at that range, he might say, "Hell yeah, I'll give you, $5 off or $10 off."
And the other thing to do there too, not to steal where you were going with that, but if we talk about the lifetime value of a customer, if you walked into that same manager and used those words and made him question, what's the lifetime value of your customer? Odds are if someone's going to an indoor range, it's because they don't have anywhere else to go, or maybe it's convenient, or maybe it's hot and they want it air conditioned or whatever. But the point is, they're going to be looking at it from a business perspective too. And if they can look at a new shooter from a lifetime value of their customer, maybe you work out a program where every new student you bring through your course at their range, they almost have kind of a VIP or membership or whatever you want to call the program. Maybe they get discounted range time forever, indefinitely. The range is going to have their costs that they're going to have to cover, but that's something that they can figure out and say, whatever, instead of $10 a half hour per lane, they can do it for even $9. Again, over the course of however many times you go to that range, or the students do, it's all going to add up. And if you translate that into something tangible, like if you shoot 3 times a month, that's an extra box of ammunition or whatever. Those are the things that you need to start thinking of outside the box, like a business owner communicating with another business owner to make it mutually beneficial.
Well, and then there's also other tricks that you can apply. So let's deal with round numbers here. I'm a great math guy, but let's say that you spit some awesome game at that manager, and he bites and he says, "I'm going to give you $10 off," which is probably a little bit high, but for the sake of round numbers, let's roll with it. So then maybe you approach your students as part of your value added. You're giving them $5 off, and you pocket $5. 20 students, $5. That's $100. That's an extra $100 in your pocket.
Yeah,
that's easy math.
And you're still, presenting the range as a value added partner. And again, hopefully encouraging them to leverage that facility for their future shooting purposes, because it's all about building that relationship with the range too.
So what else would you do to find your price to come to the market? Is that about sum it up? What did we come up with? We've got operating costs. And operating cost too, guys, is stationary, your paper. Hell, the paper that your material comes on, that's an operating cost. Ink from your printer.
The gas to and from. What's the minimum hourly rate you're willing to accept to pay yourself? You've got to include that too.
Yeah, that amazes me that a lot of guys don't look at their time. They don't quantify, what do I want to make per hour? Is it $20 an hour? Is it $25 an hour? Is it $50 an hour? I mean, these are things that you need to consider. What's worth giving away half a day or a weekend.
Do a market analysis and know what your competitors are offering at. So at not only their price point, know what it is they're offering and how can you make yourself different to stand out.
Yeah, and that's some real easy recon. You just call the guy or girl, and as if though you're a prospective student. Hey, I'm John. I'm interested in concealed carry or basic handgun or whatever. I got your name from such and such, and what do you offer?
And some of the other examples we gave too were, what do you specialize in? What can you offer to wrap around the context of the course you're offering? So if it's CCW, do you plant those seeds for them to come back and take a self-defense inside or outside of the home? Do you offer them a discount on a follow-up training as a result? Really, it's the long game. So think about that relationship over the course of the life of the relationship and the training, which should really never end, and plant those seeds early and continue to foster and build it as a relationship versus a transaction.
And sometimes the easiest things that people find value in are the most simple for you to execute on. Like we discussed earlier, giving them a PDF or probably a PDF is the best versus a PowerPoint. Not everybody has PowerPoint, but giving them some sort of cliff notes to the course as a quick reference for a later date. I mean, that's too easy. Sit down one evening, jam it out, and now you've got it. It's repeat. And that's value. When somebody calls you up and, as a prospect, and you give them your pitch, talk about all the extra stuff that you're doing for them. And I think that'll resonate.
Yeah, I think that comes through definitely, especially in the conversation. So to bring this up to a close, if there's any of these topics that you want us to go further in depth on or give different or more pointed examples of in the future, you could always shoot us an email or leave a comment on the podcast or get in touch with us through our website. And we'd be happy to take those examples and dive deeper and maybe use it as a use case scenario so that you can take that as something that's actionable as well.
Yeah, definitely. That about wraps it up for today. We try to keep these around 20 minutes. We went a little bit over. I think we're at 28 minutes now or somewhere around there. But thanks for hanging with us, guys. I hope you found a little bit of value in this. And like Jeff said, if you have any ideas for any other content or any particular subjects you would like for us to hit on in a later podcast, that makes it easier on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, guys.
See ya.